Okay, all right. So I am honored to be here, Peter McLaren. Others of you here on this great faculty. I'm indeed honored. I'm indeed honored. So I have about 121 slides that I want to get. I'm just kidding. I'm not just kidding. Not a minute. But I do have a lot that I like to say. I do have a lot that I like to say, and in looking at the amount of time I have, I realize that I'm going to have to cut some things a little short. I do have a lot more depth behind a lot of the points I want to make today, but I want to move forward so that we are able to maximize our time. The sort of framing question today really is this one, and it actually emerges from and it draws from the work of one of my mentors, Jackie Irvine. And the question is, how do we help students dream who have only known nightmares? Right? How do we help students dream who've only known nightmares? And in framing this talk and thinking about urban education in particular, I want to sort of have a conversation with you today, if you will, about issues that divide and issues that sort of bring us together. And the first issue that I want to cover really is about testing. Right, it's about testing, and I want to beat a dead horse here. I was on a panel a few months ago, and someone stood and who was much more in support of testing than I would ever be, and said, and here I stand in the George, but it's kind of it's ironic in a lot of ways. But and the person said, "What do you have against testing?" And I responded that it's the tests are not evil, right? It's what we choose to use the test for that I have major problems with, and it is unfair for us to blame issues that are far outside of teachers' control. Linda Darling Hammond made a really provocative point. She says the Reagan era introduced a new theory of reform focused on outcomes rather than inputs. That is, high stakes testing without investing that drove most policy initiatives. The situation in many urban and rural schools deteriorated over the decades. Drops in real per pupil expenditures accompanied tax cuts and growing enrollment. Meanwhile, student needs grew with immigration, concentrated poverty and homelessness, and increased numbers of students requiring second language instruction and special educational services. Although some federal support to high need schools and districts was restored during the 1990s, it was not enough to recoup the earlier losses, and after 2000, inequality grew once again. And so the idea that we need to shift our gaze from outcomes to inputs is really the big point related to testing. We need to shift how we think, and we need to shift how we talk about the very nature of testing. You're leaders, you're educational leaders. And so in your conversations, what if we shifted the very ways in which we engage conversations related to what's happening with our students? What if we decided, what if we deliberately chose to rethink how we talked about what's actually happening? What I've come to understand is that we're focusing on too much testing and not enough teaching. Too much testing and not enough teaching. I know I'm right about it. That's right, I said it. And I also want to make it clear. I also want to make it clear that some of us have started to argue that we actually don't have an achievement gap at all. I know y'all gonna be like, dude, what is he talking about? Just show him the door, right? We don't have an achievement gap at all. What some of us have started to argue and understand is what we really have is a teacher quality gap, and we have a teacher training gap, and an effective leadership gap. We don't have an achievement gap, but what we have is a challenging curriculum gap, and a school funding gap, and a digital divide gap, and a school counseling gap. And we don't have an achievement gap, but what we really have is a wealth and income gap. And what we really have is we have an employment opportunity gap, right? We don't have an achievement gap. What we really have is an affordable housing gap, and a healthcare gap, and a nutrition gap. That's right, I said it. We don't have an achievement gap, but what we have is an instruction gap, right? And we have a school integration gap, and we have a quality childcare gap, and we have a school and pop culture gap. We don't have an achievement gap. What we have is we have an opportunity gap. That's right. And so if we shifted the very ways in which we talked about the realities of what's happening in schools, we can complexify, we can nuance what's actually happening in schools. What I've come to argue in my work is this: until we penetrate these areas, right? Until we really get our heads around ways to systematically design studies and interventions and so forth that support these areas, we're going to find ourselves somewhat in a holding pattern. So point one really is about shifting our focus away from an achievement gap to one that really focuses on opportunity gaps and other gaps, away from deficits to assets, away from equality to equity. So there will be a quiz at the end of my talk. Issue one was what? Was about what? What was issue one about? I'm gonna go back to the first slide. I'm gonna go back to the first. So the first one was about our obsession with testing, right? Our obsession with, so you got to pay attention. You got to pay attention. All right. So issue two. Issue two really is about socioeconomic status and poverty. If you look at these data, these data show the relationship between uh, high school completion, but between education and earnings, right? So if you look at these data, you see the relationship there from 2000 2010. This next slide actually shows over a career span. These are self-reported data. If you will. I was giving a talk, I think in Waukesha, Wisconsin, and there was a teacher who raised her hand and she said, "I have a master's degree. I don't make anywhere near 100, and I won't make anywhere near what you're saying." What are you saying? These are national data, right? These are data that are taken across different uh, uh, areas of employment. These data show you poverty guidelines. So you see, I always look at a family of four there. Are y'all able to see that? See it really clearly? Right. So if one earns in 48 states 23,551 bucks, that family is not eligible for federal support and state support. So how do people get to be successful in this work and in this life? I want to talk now briefly about this notion of meritocracy. And meritocracy is the idea that folks are awarded based mostly or solely on their ability, their performance, and their talents. Right? There are various mindsets that shape this folks who embrace meritocracy. Mindset one: all groups of people were born with the same opportunities. And if students or people just work hard and put forth effort and follow the law, then like a formula, they'll be successful. And then we give examples of folks who've done it, right? Well, that Oprah Winfrey did it, right? Mindset two: if students do not succeed, it is because they are not working hard enough, not because of other factors that might fall outside of their control. Voices of teachers. One teacher said, "I get so sick of people," she was actually talking about me, "making something out of nothing. My grandparents immigrated to the U.S. country with nothing, and they made something of their lives because they worked hard. But I am mindful of what curriculum theorist Beverly Gordon stated very succinctly. She said, it is difficult, and don't miss this, to critique the world and work to change it when the world works for you." Mm. Amen, Beverly. Amen, Beverly. Another teacher said, I'm going to be the kind of teacher who follows your advice and have high expectations. If a student is not turning in his homework on time, I'm not going to give any slack. It's going to be a zero in my grade book. And there's no conception of why the student is not turning in his homework on time. What does money bring? What does money bring? Trust funds established and passed down from one generation to the next. When I was at Vanderbilt, one of my good colleagues he asked me to give him a ride to CarMax. Y'all have CarMax out here? Okay, so he give me a ride. I guess y'all do that. So he said, give me a ride after school after we get off today to take me over. My family, we're gonna get a new minivan. So I was like, cool, give me a ride to CarMax. We jump in the car, and as we're driving, my wife at the time was a State Farm agent, and I don't know if you know this, but State Farm does more than house loans. They also do mortgages. They also do car loans, right? So as we're driving, I'm like, what kind of interest rate you gonna get on that thing, man? Because I'm trying to get my wife a loan, right? I'm just putting it out there. I'm trying to get her a loan. So as we're driving, I feel him frowning as we're drowning, frowning at me, and I'm like, why are you? What's the deal? He was like, don't you know that cars depreciate as soon as you drive off the lot? It's like, yep, I understand that. He said, I would never take a loan out on a car. He said, we pay cash for our vehicles. So at the time, the car was about $26,000, I suspect. And he had been at Vanderbilt 1 year longer than I, and our salaries better have been somewhere around the same. Yep. When you think we should be making somewhere in the same ballpark. All right. But what I came to understand in that moment more deeply than I had ever understood before is that he had a trust fund, right? That had been passed down to him one generation to the next. And so when we talk about this notion of playing field, right? We really have to problematize, you teachers. You hear me? You get what I'm saying? You follow me what I'm saying, right? So how many of you are sports folks out there? Sport people who are into sports. All right, not very many. So I'm gonna have to really do some uh, to really work at this. Okay, so it's like follow me here. Follow me. All right, so it's like being born on third base and thinking you hit a triple. You get it, right? So in the midst of my honoring the fact that he was in a position to pay cash for his vehicle, we have to be mindful that folks experience life, and their experiences, of course, are shaped by a range of issues far outside of what we might quote unquote earn. What else? Property. Finance college education without having to solicit student loans. When I moved to that's right, I said it, the Ohio State University to pursue my doctorate. That's right. My mom continued to mail me these care packages in the mail, right? So Quinn, they would have like cheese and crackers, and then I got bold and eventually I said, Mama, stop sending me these care packages. What I really need is money, right? But she continued mailing those care packages. Right, we're in different spaces. I grew up in the segregated South. Private and independent school tuition. I consulted with one of the wealthiest schools in the state of Tennessee, and when students hit 8th grade, they start in being able to enroll in ACT prep courses. It's a part of the curriculum. And then we have a nerve to compare the outcomes on those exams with students who are not exposed to those kinds of privileges, right? Private and tutoring in academic subjects. What else? Exposure to different cultures and languages. Financial support with graduate assistance and so forth. Kaplan courses. And this is the real talk. When I was at the Ohio State University, I didn't know what a Kaplan course was until I started my doctoral studies. I didn't, right? No one told me that you could go get a prep course to boost your GRE scores. Didn't know it. Vacations and getaways, both domestically and so forth, and zone school systems and the like. So on a classroom level, teachers need to be aware that factors far beyond merit give people their positions in society. And moreover, if the meritocracy argument were accurate, we know from a sociological perspective that that merit would determine who gets to go to college, right? But family income is the strongest predictor. Family income is the strongest predictor. The more money families earn, the more likely, of course, their children are to go to college. So what was issue one? Obsession with all right, okay, all right. And issue two was about what? Socioeconomic status and poverty. So in thinking about issues that divide, the third issue is really that I want to share is about counseling and psychological services. Counseling and psychological services. When I was conducting research for Start Where You Are, there was a robbery. Y'all got to stick with me because my wife says I tend to give too many details. So if you get it and if you kind of understand what I'm saying, kind of smile at me and agree. But if you don't, I'm going to keep giving details because that's what good teachers should do, right? You want people with you, right? All right, you with me so far? All right, so there was a robbery when I was conducting research in a middle school. There was a robbery that had been committed about in the neighborhood, convenience store about 400 feet from the front of this middle school. The robbery was committed by high school students, not middle school students. I was conducting research in the middle school, you got me? But the feeder school, two of the students from the feeder school and the high school committed this robbery. So far, so good. All right, so, and this was a mom and pop shop. The husband and wife literally opened the store in the morning. They closed the store in the evening. They had their meals there. They spent a lot of their time there. This was the store that the students stopped, the middle school students would stop as they walked to school to get those Doritos and Now Laters and, right, those things that drive teachers crazy, right? So after the robbery, so the high school students and a high school student, a 16-year-old, shot and killed the store clerk. Well, this happened on a Thursday. I was due back into school to do observations the following week, and so when I arrived on campus on the bus yard, guess what the students were still talking about? You can say it. What do you think? The shooting, right? They were talking about, oh, y'all gonna make me work. Help me, help me. All right. So they were talking about the robbery on the bus yard, in the corridors. The students were talking about the robbery, right? But in the classroom, there was no mention, right? So students were still whispering, talking about the robbery. They were passing notes. Uh, in the cafeteria during in the cafeteria when the students were having lunch, the students were still engaging conversations about the robbery, posing questions like, I wonder where they got the gun. I wonder how many years they're going to get. All these kind of questions that were in their hearts and in their minds, right? So as a part of my reciprocity for conducting research for Start Where You Are, I conducted professional development with the teachers, right? So, and about a week later, I was scheduled to do a PD session with the teachers. So when I walked into the library, one of the first questions I posed, there were about 30, I guess about 32, 33 people in the room, and I just posed a question. I said, hey guys, this robbery took place around the corner. I'm just wondering why there was no discussion or even a site for curriculum possibilities related to the robbery. Right? And when I tell you the folks in that room ganged up on me, one after the other. And I was like, dang, I thought we were cool. I thought we had developed a relationship. Mm-mm. One after the other, they gave me reasons why it was completely inappropriate for them to engage the robbery. And I want to be clear. I understand that it was a tricky space. What's some of what you think I heard? What do you think I heard? What are some feedback you think I believe I may have gotten from some of the teachers in the room, the educators? Why not robbery? Jump in. It's inappropriate for their age range, right? Are you kidding me? Yep, heard that. What else? Yes, I heard that, right? If we bring up the robbery, then we romanticize it. I heard that. Yes. Now you're getting now you're going to the neighborhood, right? Because when they said when the one person you're getting close. I don't want to give it away. All right. So anything else you can think of, real quick, real quick. Anybody else? Anybody? Yes. Absolutely. Yep. Heard that as well. Anybody else? Yes. Yes. Absolutely heard that, Keith. Absolutely. Yes. Got that? Absolutely. Now I am a math teacher. How dare you? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, okay. All right. So we don't have a lot of we don't have so when one teacher said the robbery won't show up on the test, folks in the room said, yeah, right? And to be honest, I don't mean to critique the teachers or to sort of vilify the teachers and their experiences, right? That was a part of their own uh, reality, these accountability measures and so forth. Uh, but what's really telling to me is the ways in which it was dismissed, even though it was so salient to the students' experiences and so forth. And then there was a guy who, if I set my computer up on this side of the library, he sat on the opposite end of the library with his arms folded, right? If I set my computer up on this side of the library, he sat on the opposite end of the library, as far away from me as he possibly could. And I always take showers, so I don't know what the deal was, right? And he would sit with his arms folded, right? And so on this day, he never said one word for the 2 hours that I was in the school. He never said one word to me the entire time I had been conducting research and doing the PD. And he broke his silence. He said, and furthermore, and I was like, come with it, buddy, because I'm not scared. Come with it. He said, furthermore, I teach math and science. What is a robbery, and building on Keith's point earlier, what does a robbery have to do with my teaching math and science, right? And so I had to really step back and say, well, I have not done a great job. Because part of my job was to try to help them be responsive to the realities of their students. So I take full responsibility. I said, well, let's think about it for a moment. So crime had been a concern in the community in general. Uh, and I said on a very basic level, I said you could count the distance between streetlights, right? And guesstimate the distance between streetlights and to look at the relationship perhaps between well-lit communities and those that aren't. I said, but what if you go a little bit deeper? I said a lot more, but I want to get to the point, right? I said, what if you went a little bit deeper? I said, what if you had the students count the number of liquor stores in their community and look at the relationship between violence and let's say substance abuse or access to alcohol. Is there some math in that? Is there a little bit? Where are my math folks? A little bit. Is there a little bit of math? Okay, because the others of y'all are looking like I don't know. Maybe there's some math in there. All right. So I said, what if you counted the number of gun shops in the community, right? I said, and look at the relationship between access, exposure to gun shops. And then you can also have them compare those access points to suburban, perhaps more affluent communities. There's some math in that, right? And I said, but moreover, we could talk for days. I said, what if the math teacher actually had a conversation with the English language arts teacher? Imagine that. Imagine if the math teacher talked to the literacy, the language arts teacher, right? And moving beyond sort of this, moving up, to areas of social action. What if the students constructed a letter? At the time, the police chief was Ronald Surpass. And they wrote a letter saying, "Dear Mr. Police Chief, we are tired of the robberies, the crime that's being committed in our community." And then do some research. Over the last 3 years, we found, gathering data to substantiate the number of the patterns and so forth. And then also outline some solutions, some recommendations in terms of how they might be able to those outside the community and those with authority might be able to support changing and transforming those communities. That's the kind of work that is potentially transformative because the students are not then the students are then moving to spaces of activism and not only sort of embracing the realities of crime or whatever in their communities, but perhaps most importantly, what's really interesting about what was told, what I heard from the teachers, is that those students were just expected to just deal with the fact that they had experienced robbery. And we often look at and we often think when I tell this story, people often wonder or they think that I'm talking about the remorse students felt for the shooters. And that's not the case. What I found just by asking the students, they told me that they were mourning for the loss of the husband and wife team. They were mourning because they had developed a relationship. These were folks they interacted with every day. But when we have conversations like when the young lady said, "I'm not," that falls outside of my skill set, right? I'm not equipped to respond to that part of who students are. Shame on us. Shame on us, right? Because those students are struggling. Those students need and they actually deserve your grown self. That's right, I said it. When you're experiencing traumatic experiences, don't you need to work through those experiences? So when the student comes in and tells you to kiss his ass, they're doing it for a reason, right? And if they really meant that, they probably wouldn't show up. Right? But responding to the humanity of who folks are. Most teachers across the country are not trained. They don't have experiences in dealing with traumatic experiences. And so our students show up day in and day out in schools that are underprepared to respond to those aspects of who they are. Shame on us. 1 in 5 schools across this country lacks a guidance counselor. 1 in 5 schools. And then look at these data. When you think about the different contexts, the places where one might think counseling, psychological services might be most beneficial are the very places that are proportionately under-resourced. Shame on us, shame on us, shame on us.